Hi there, I'm Kim Berry, editor of Food and Drink Business. Today I'm joined by Cameron Gordon from Incite, and we're going to talk about all things Singapore. Hi, Cameron.
How you doing, Kim?
I'm very well. Can you just give us a snapshot of Singapore as a market for people looking to export there?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think first and foremost, if we talk about, I guess perhaps the economic and cultural side of the Singapore market, look, I think Singapore is very interesting. It's had an incredibly interesting history. It's gone from a very, I guess, low economic power situation to a very high economic power situation relatively quickly. And it does have a very relatively within the Southeast Asian region, very high consumer income and spending power. For grocery brands, the grocery market within Singapore is incredibly sophisticated, both from an offline and an online perspective. If you think,
So what does that, sorry, Cameron, sorry, Cameron, I'm going to interrupt. I'm very bossy like that. So tell me, when a market is sophisticated, what does that mean? What does that look like?
Sure. So if you walk into, say, a cold storage or a Fair Price, who are really the equivalent of Coles or Woolies in Australia,
Right.
you're certainly not going to be disappointed. The quality of the stores, the merchandising, just the way that the supermarket operates is, think of a higher end Coles or Woolies. So
Okay.
it's developed. You've got a great range of international products. Versus somewhere perhaps like the Philippines or somewhere like Indonesia, which are obviously emerging markets. Singapore is very much a mature market. It understands imported products, and it has a very good Australian trade business already, with many or most well-known Australian brands on the shelf.
So you'd really have to have literally have all your ducks in a row, wouldn't you, if you're going into a market like that that's already really well established and has high expectations of products that they are importing?
Oh, definitely. I mean, Singapore is not really a producer of anything when it comes to food, so all their products are imported. It's perhaps one of the most open markets in the world. There are really anybody can become an importer. There are zero import taxes and the like. So it's very open, which is fantastic. But the flip side of that, of course, is that it's ultra competitive. So
Right.
everybody is there. Everybody is fighting, firstly, to be on the shelf in Singapore, and then to stay on the shelf in Singapore. And because it's such a small geographical region, there is really limited space on the shelf. So, getting on the shelf is difficult, but staying on the shelf is more challenging. So, if you think about it in terms of real estate, the per square centimeter value of shelf space in Singapore is very high. So if your product is not turning over and generating the sales, then there's a chance that you're going to be moved on and somebody else will be put in.
So that's obviously a big challenge for an Australian company that is looking to build a market in Singapore. What would be, say, the top three challenges that an Australian company will probably face, so that they can, obviously now have a bit of a heads up that these are things that are going to cross their path?
Yeah, sure. Look, I'll come to the challenges in a second. There are some opportunities which I didn't touch on, which it's good to look at the opportunities before the challenges, I think. And look, in terms of Singapore, English is first language in Singapore. Many of the consumers in Singapore have either studied or traveled to Australia, so they are very familiar with Australian brands, which I think is very positive. There is a larger expat population in Singapore, banking, finance, all these types of things. Singapore is very much a hub. So there are a lot of Australians living in Singapore again. So there's some benefit there. The expat population isn't what it was, as the cost of real estate in Singapore has increased. But when it comes to the challenges, I think I've touched on one, which was, it is a very open market, and hence it's very competitive. So you really do have to come with your A game. You have to come ready, not just to to ship your products, but really to support the business and to contribute towards the growth of the business, both in terms of effort and in terms of financial contribution in the Singapore market. It is a very expensive market to enter. To get on the shelf in Singapore in grocery, you do need to pay for that privilege. You pay a listing fee, which is effectively a fee for getting on the shelf. And because there are only really two major grocery chains in Singapore, you have a duopoly situation, which means that there's not a lot of competition in that space.
And is that price prohibitive?
It can.
Is that price sort of really?
It's tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the SKU count that you're putting in and the number of stores that you're going into. It is considerable, yes. So with that in mind, if you're going to go, you need to go with commitment, and you need to go not only with the view of getting on the shelf, but staying on the shelf, of course. And how do you stay on the shelf? Marketing, promotion, investment in the brand. Halal is also a consideration for Singapore, not so much for grocery, but a number of the larger hotel kitchens, cafe kitchens, that chain style, are halal-owned kitchens. So you've really got to come ready if you're wanting to go into those channels with your halal certification.
Okay. So what categories do perform well or better in the Singapore market? Is it chilled products or ambient or particular channels within those?
Look, I think, it's a very straightforward market. The cold chain logistics are there. Supply chain is very straightforward and mature. So there's no issues when it comes to shipping chilled, shipping frozen containers relative to some of the more emerging Southeast Asian markets. Look, in terms of the categories that are doing well, a couple of them that are doing well, and the reasons for that are, Singapore, from a government perspective, is really trying to cut down on sugar consumption. In Singapore, they're regulating against high sugar beverages, for example, and with special labeling requirements and the like for those products. So products like functional low sugar beverages are doing very well to kind of counter that. On-the-go snacks, both healthy and unhealthy, while the government is regulating against sugar, we all love sugary and salty snacks. And Singaporeans are different. They're busy, they're on the go, they want something in between moving around. So snacks have always done well for us there. Look, I guess kind of to skip around your question a little bit, I really do feel that there are opportunities in all categories, but you got to get the fundamentals right. You got to get the price strategy right. You got to support it with marketing and promotion. What we're finding is that well-branded products that can really be leveraged in the marketing are doing particularly well because the food product, the quality of the food product is somewhat a given, but it's really the stretch that you can get on the brand in terms of storytelling, in terms, especially in that digital space on Insta, Facebook. And if you can really get in front of the consumer there with a good product that's well branded, there's good opportunity there.
Yeah, it sounds really intense. It sounds like a really competitive, really intense place to be trying to get your product in front of consumers.
Oh, look, it is. But I think to some degree, all markets now are ultra competitive. All the growth markets, the markets that are still there for growth, right? And we all know the Southeast Asian story in particular, and the middle class growth and the spending power growth and these types of things. And to get a piece of that, then you've really, when it comes to any market, you've really got to invest in it. You've got to invest in your brand. You've got to back your brand. In order to do well in the market. Yeah, for sure.
Look, that's a really great snapshot of just one market that may be, percolating in a food or beverage manufacturer's mind as to where they'd like to export. So it's that's really interesting. Thank you. One very last quick thing. Why would a company prioritize Singapore?
Okay, that's a good question. I think, look, Singapore's a market of 5.5 million people. It's not the largest market, but it does fulfill a very important role within the greater Southeast Asian region. It's very much an exhibition space. So if you're doing well, in Singapore, if your brand's going well, if your sales are going well, if your distribution is good, Malaysians, Filipinos, Thais, Indonesians, all consumers and distributors and decision makers visit Singapore to see what's happening in new emerging business, right? So you've really got to be doing well in Singapore. You don't have to be, but it's a definite leg up, an advantage if you're doing well there, if you're performing well there in terms of your greater Southeast Asian business.
Sure. Thanks, Cameron. That's fantastic.
You're welcome, Kim. Thank you.
And we'll come back for another episode looking at another country.